In 2009, Meeting Needs Rehab conducted a wheelchair clinic in a rural area outside of Kuching. At that clinic, we met a single father. He was bringing up his 8 children on his salary as a maintenance worker at a college campus. His youngest child, at the age of 8 months, had contracted meningitis, which had resulted in a condition known as cerebral palsy. When his wife left, his 5th child, a daughter in primary 5, left school to look after her 3 younger siblings, including her disabled baby sister. The family had come to the clinic that day to request a wheelchair for this little girl who is now 4 years old. We were hesitant to give a wheelchair, and we explained to her father that with intensive therapy, with daily exercise, with regular stimulation, with medical intervention, one day his little girl had the potential to stand up and walk. He then told us about his situation. His kampong was about more than 2 hours from the nearest centre offering therapy. He couldn't take time off work to take his daughter to therapy because on a daily salary, if he didn't work, his children didn't eat that night. If an older sibling had been able to take her, there would still have been a problem because the family had only one motorbike and the father needed that to get to work. The kampong was too far from the therapy centre for any outreach therapists to visit. And apparently there was no one in the kampong who had any knowledge or experience about cerebral palsy, so no one could advise them or support them. And the local kindergarten wouldn't accept a 4-year-old who was crawling on the floor. We wound up that wheelchair clinic feeling excited and satisfied with the assistance we were going to be able to give to most of the children we had met. But we also felt saddened by the reality of this little girl's situation. And maybe her father went home and thought the same thing, because 4 days later, he called me. And he asked me if I could take his little girl to live with my family. This was crazy. But 3 days later, she was living with our family. And she's been with us ever since, as part of our family. So I'm not telling you Liana's story just to tell you her story. I'm telling you because I think it epitomizes many of the challenges and struggles that families with disabled relatives face every day, especially if they're living in the rural areas. It also gives you some insight into the type of families that Meeting Needs Rehab is involved with, and some of the unexpected outcomes. So I need to take a step back here, because I'm sure most of you are thinking, well, what or who is Meeting Needs Rehab? So Meeting Needs Rehab really is just a collaboration of 2 people, me and my friend Caroline, who's in the audience today. And we are both therapists, we are both foreigners, but we have both lived and worked in Sarawak for many years. Back in 2006, we were casual acquaintances. And then a string of coincidences brought us together. It happened that somebody asked me if I knew of anybody who needed a wheelchair. And the very same week, the mother of a young adult contacted Caroline to see whether she could assist in assessing and finding a wheelchair for her daughter. So we decided to visit the family together, but as soon as we went into the house, we realized that this young lady, because of her severe physical limitations, was never going to be able to sit in a standard wheelchair. What she needed was something very sophisticated, very specialized, very expensive. So we went off, sat down, had a cup of coffee, discussed what we could do to help meet the needs of this family. And what we decided was there was only one thing we could do. This was in the days before mass social media appeals. And what we did was we sent emails out to all our friends that night, our friends and our family, both here and abroad. And we asked them, we told them about this situation, and within 24 hours, we had raised more than enough to buy the wheelchair that this young lady needed. Consequently, her mother contacted many other families, also with disabled relatives. And within 2 weeks, we had received more than 20 requests from people to go and make home visits. This was huge for these families. Liana's case has already highlighted to you some of the challenges that families face trying to get their disabled relatives to hospitals and clinics. She also told them that we would provide the most suitable mobility aids that their relatives needed, free of charge. So we visited all 20 families, and at the end of this fortnight, we realized that we really had a calling here. We really felt very passionate about helping these families. And the message that this mom had given to her friends really set the bar for us. We made it one of our priorities to make sure that these children and adults received the very best mobility aids that were available for them. I think most people don't realize when they donate something that to have a mobility aid that is of the wrong design or the wrong size can not only be uncomfortable or unsafe, but can actually have a detrimental effect on the person who's using it. So, over the years, since 2006, Caroline and I have met almost 400 disabled individuals throughout Sarawak. And through generous sponsorship, donations, fundraising events, we've been able to supply more than 330 mobility aids. Now, we are just two people. We are foreigners, but that doesn't mean we have limitless bank accounts. We have had to rely on sponsors, on donors, on volunteers. We've made PowerPoint presentations, we've given talks, we've visited schools, we've sent out emails, we now have a Facebook page. And we are amazed every day at people's generosity and people's concern. Sometimes when we have visited families, we are perhaps the only people who've really shown some concern for them. And some of these families have asked us to help them with other things as well. So again, through donations and sponsorship, we've been able to help in many, many different ways, with education, with home modification, with setting up home baking industry, for example, to help the parents who find themselves in these situations. So when people hear about what Caroline and I do, there's usually a fairly standard response. People say to us, "Gosh, these families are so blessed to have met you both." Yes, I don't dispute that. For the most part, they are blessed to have met us. But once we've made the initial contact, once we have done our assessment, we see ourselves more as the middleman, or middle women in this case, with the role of linking people who really care with people who really need. That's what we do. So the blessings that come to these families come from everyone. Everybody who volunteers their time, their ideas, makes donations. All these people pour their blessings through us to these families. But people usually go on and have a couple of questions they ask us afterwards. This seems like a good opportunity to address some of those questions. Some people ask us, "Don't you begrudge the time that you spend doing this? Takes you away from your family, from your leisure?" And I can understand where that question comes from. All of us today in high-pressure jobs, working long hours, we really value our leisure time and our family time. But to answer that question directly, I would say no. Why would we begrudge that time? If you have an interest or a passion, a hobby that you feel passionate about, you don't begrudge the time you spend on it. You look forward to it, you anticipate it. We've taken our families with us on outings, on deliveries. They're very happy to come along with us. They've formed bonds and friendships with the people that they meet. And that's really important to everybody. The other question that we're often asked is, what do you get out of this? I mean, does anybody pay you to do this? No. We don't get paid in any conventional sense. But we have received opportunities and experiences that money could not buy. The roads that we have traveled doing this work are roads that most Sarawakians have never been down. We've taken ferries across wide rivers. We've driven down quite dangerous dirt tracks. We've gone over mountains. We've gone through jungle. We've walked across long, rickety suspension bridges to visit schools in remote areas. We've trudged through paddy fields. We've splashed through floods. We've met amazing people. We have been welcomed into communities and homes. We've had the honor of being able to exchange our skills and our knowledge and learn skills and knowledge from other people. We've met ordinary people with extraordinary stories. People whose strength, whose resilience, whose faith would inspire you, would amaze you. We've also met many fun-loving, enthusiastic, inspiring volunteers of all ages, from all backgrounds. And they really give us the drive to continue. That's my son and some of the friends that he's made on the journeys. Just recently, we met a group of strangers. We were trying to find a house. We just had the name of the children and the kampong. We had no idea where to find the house. We were about 1 hour away. And one person after another led us to their house. I often hear Caroline say that the work that we do has strengthened her faith in human nature and in a greater power. Sometimes the challenges we think we are facing in trying to meet the needs of some of these families seem impossible to overcome. And yet somehow, suddenly, the resources that we need become available. Just recently, we visited a house, two brothers that we've been supporting over the years in one way and another. And as we left, their father stopped us. He said, "I want to thank you, but my words are not enough. I have nothing to give you, so I want to give you my song." And he picked up his guitar and he sang for us in their simple little room. And I tell you, not one person left that house that day without a tear in their eye. How much more valuable than money is a moment like that? So before I close, I want to throw a question back to you, the audience. If anything that I've said to you today has inspired you, if any of the stories have moved you, any of the people I've mentioned have touched you in some way, I want you to think of this question. If we give with integrity, if we give with honest intention, if we give with passion and compassion, who is more blessed? The giver, the receiver, or the giver? Thank you.